I wanted to get your understanding of what happens if we see a stay-at-home recovery. I've been talking about that the last few days, where we're recovering, but everyone kind of stays at home, which will be good for travel within different countries, but not between each other. Are you seeing any evidence of that?
We have already seen that. So if you look at the US domestic market, it has effectively recovered to where it was in 2019. And if you look globally, domestic markets in the main have got back to where they were. For the first half of this year, we see domestic markets around 33% down versus 2019, whereas international markets are still down about 86%. And in fact, if you strip out some of the domestic markets where there are significant restrictions in place, such as India, where the government has put capacity and pricing regulations in place, you'd see globally domestic markets are in effect back to where they were, and in some cases above where they were. I think the main reason for that, though, is that government restrictions are discouraging people from traveling internationally. So we do see in effect, a three-speed recovery. Cargo is doing extremely well. Domestic markets, in effect, fully recovered, but international markets lagging significantly behind.
The IATA chair, Robin Hayes, is going to be starting to fly North Atlantic next week with JetBlue. The first of the service that they're going to be doing, narrow-body aircraft across the Atlantic. You can fly this way from JFK to Heathrow. The UK is removing its restrictions, but I still can't go the other way. You guys are going to have your AGM at the beginning of October. Do you think I'll be able to go the other way and join you at that AGM at the beginning of October in Boston?
Yes, I believe so. I'll certainly be there in Boston. And of course, what you can see is demand for transatlantic flying has significantly increased. So while the US is closed under the 212F to Europe and UK, US citizens can travel freely. And I'm actually quite glad that the EU and the UK has opened up and hasn't demanded that the US reciprocate. I think that will take a little bit of time, but I do believe that we will get there.
Willie, talk to me about business travel, as there's still a lot of confusion, but clearly people want to get back into the office and do stuff. What have you noticed in business travel pickup?
Well, as we had commented a number of months ago, we expect business travel to recover, but to lag the recovery in leisure travel. I think there is some degree of acceptance now that business travel may not recover to the same levels as 2019, but I don't think it will be as impacted as some people believe as a result of technology. Certainly the research that we do indicates that most businesses are looking forward to getting back to traveling because they understand how important face-to-face meetings are. So it will take a little bit more time to recover, but we expect that that recovery will start in the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter of this year, and then continue through 2022.
The EU and the UK, to a certain extent, are starting to change slot waivers. Is this the point, and probably maybe in the winter, we start to see this more obviously, are we going to get to the point soon where actually we start to see the effect of COVID really being felt, that airlines are going to start to go out of business? You said a few days ago that you think the lean ones will survive, will thrive. What about the rest, Willie? What is the autumn going to look like?
Yeah, I think there is a real risk that as some airlines try to ramp up their capacity and start incurring additional costs that they have managed to avoid through the first phase of this. Because as you know, fuel typically represents about 25% of an airline's cost base. And most airlines have significantly reduced their fuel costs because they're not flying. Those costs will increase, as will labour costs, because a lot of the government support schemes start to wind down as we go through this third quarter. So costs will ramp up, and I think there could well be a disconnect between the increase in the cost base and the revenue flows coming in, which clearly will mean to an increase in the cash burn. So it's going to be a difficult time for some airlines. We have to take optimism, though, from what we're seeing in the US, where the airline industry is back generating cash and in some cases even profit. So I'm optimistic that for most airlines, they will be able to manage this, but it is going to be much more difficult as we go into this phase of re-establishing networks that have in effect been shut down.
Willie, do you think we're done with state aid? Do you think government is still prepared to step in at this point?
I think there will be a case for some governments to support some airlines. It hasn't been uniform, even across the EU, where the regulations are uniform. We've seen quite a bit of state aid in some countries, but very little in others. And I think there is a case to be made for support to be given to airlines who have been unable to fly because of severe restrictions imposed by governments. So I think we may well see some additional state aid as we go through this year and maybe even the early part of next year.